And we're starting.
And we are live. Wonderful.
We are live. We've been chatting it up for about 7 or 8 minutes now.
I know, getting all excited. I haven't spoken to Jeffrey in a while, so it's always wonderful.
Fun is already used up. Do you think we've already, the whole sort of haven't seen you in ages kind of fun that happens? Do you think
we could keep this going for forever, maybe we just, cancel the live stream. Let's go back to not being live and just talk personally for another hour, getting excited about things going on in our lives.
Yeah, but I am talking to you from Canada, right? I mean, it's
yes.
you're living as a kind of a refugee, a sanctuary.
I think that's like a slap in the face for all of the people who are actually.
The whole sort of haven't seen you in ages kind of fun that happens.
Oh gosh.
What are we doing? Is it me or you?
It's me. It was totally me. It was my thing was playing back, so I paused that. Right. How confusing! Suddenly you were saying things again. There's a small lag time, and I was like, "This is the strangest feeling of deja vu." But yeah, no, I am a refugee here in exile in Canada, and waiting to change over visas. So it's a good time to talk about closed borders and the inability for people to have freedom of mobility and choose their place to live around the world and all of those things.
Well, and it's very disturbing in a way that there's not more of a consensus on this topic, even in Libertyland. I mean, Naomi, the more I understand this topic and the more I understand the history, it's not possible to separate the cause of liberty generally from the cause of free migration. I mean, those are like bound up in history, and it's like free trade. Free migration of peoples is a great cause. It wasn't even questioned in the late Middle Ages, and only became a sort of an issue in the 20th century with the rise of the Leviathan state.
Yeah,
I think I agree with you. It's extremely important that we it's so funny. That we talk about this issue and have sympathy for the people who are trying to come and go from borders.
Yeah.
And the American immigration rules have been egregious for you. I mean, you're from Australia.
Yeah, I mean, it's just insane. Just to talk you through before we get on to talking about some of the free spaces around the world, just from my point of view, and I have it relatively easy compared to most other people trying to get to America.
I mean, you've got access to resources. You have.
Well, yes. Yeah, so it's like, I mean, I'm Australian, which already has a really good relationship with America. We have a specialized visa, an E3 visa. I have 2 degrees, so that already, gives me an advantage. I have savings to, sometimes be able to pay the astronomical lawyer fees involved with this stuff, because the legal jargon involved with doing visas is just incredible. And even then, it is difficult. It is incredibly difficult to move to the United States. I know a lot of friends from Australia, similar position, who've had the same visa denied many times. It's not easy, and that isn't even to start talking about people in India. If you're a doctor in India, you're on a waiting list for 70 years before you can even get thought of to get into the United States.
India, Mexico, China. I mean, forget it. So we have basically immigration, for all intents and purposes, essentially banned it in this country. And yes, there are some small exceptions for highly skilled people with family here, and specialized cases of political refugees and other things. Yeah. But even then, it's a tiny trickle compared to what it's been even in the course of the 20th century. So, it's sad, because this is a country that the culture was built.
Yeah, entirely. And it makes me really angry, because the rebuttal that you hear from anyone about any type of policy, if you're debating with someone and you say, oh, well, I don't like this in Australia, or I don't like this in America, and they say, oh, well, why don't you leave? As if it's the most simple thing in the world. And these retorts come from people who've never tried to leave. you know, because otherwise they would realize that there's nowhere to go. Name me one place in the world where you could go and be free of these things. I mean, it's just monstrous that a person can be born into this world and be subject to whatever laws the previous generation created, and they have absolutely no choice in their own life. And that's what spurred this this conversation tonight. I got an email from someone on Liberty.me, and they asked me, you know, what could I recommend? What are some liberty spaces around the world? If a person just wants to be more or less free and live their own life and not hurt anyone, is there some suggestion we could provide for them, or a way to do that? And, you know, I've had a thought about it, and you've thought about it. I've had to think about it, sorry. And I know that we have some ideas, and then we're going to discuss them tonight. And there's some really exciting things happening.
I say that it makes me extremely sad at some level that, you know, the U.S. was, you know, it's almost its destiny and purpose, and I would say even raison d'etre for us to be that world sanctuary. And we were for hundreds of years, you know, until essentially, you know, World War I, where the security state took over and the passports went into effect, and then the progressive era when the eugenics programs became all the rage, and central planning, you know, and that generation that imposed that first range of immigration restrictions was truly wicked. I mean, they were wicked in ways that I'm almost embarrassed to describe to you, because it's so horrifying to me. But and unfortunately, we're still sort of stuck with that legacy, you know.
Yeah, and you see. Sorry, go ahead.
The economic growth would be 2 or 3 times what it is that we're now, you know, for the immigration restrictions. And now that we're in these recessionary environments, that, you know, we're dealing now with, the first time in my lifetime, really a kind of wild nativist campaign to blame all the problems in America on, of all things, immigrants, even though immigration is essentially banned. Even though, you know, it's impossible for you to get in the country. I mean, you know, it's a tyrannical style regime, and so people are scapegoating immigrants. It's a sad thing to me, and so, I mean, truly, Naomi, I don't know how to put it other than to say it's tremendously un-American, you know. Yeah.
No, for sure. And it's sort of, I mean, it's a theme that we're seeing, not just in immigration, but in so many areas of life. You know, people who look at America, look at Australia. Australia was built on immigration. Yes. And people come in and they get themselves set up, and then they change the rules so that other people don't have the same privileges. And you see that, I mean, with occupational licensing, you know, businesses who were able to start up more or less without hassle, without all of the licensing we need today, and then they change the rules and try to make it harder for other people to get in. And it's just, I mean, it's really devastating and hypocritical, and people need to have a good look at themselves and ask, you know, why should I be supporting something just because it makes things easier for me if it's not the right thing to do? It's a crazy world.
I mean, just to be not just. I mean, obviously, you know, like the overwhelming number of would-be immigrants. I mean, you want to come here and work and make beautiful contributions to our, I don't want to say our, but, you know, to life and culture, and do wonderful things, and yet you faced just unbelievable, you know, headaches.
Oh God, yeah.
And I don't think that people can really understand, as you said, until they got through it. Having now written on immigration a little bit, and I was on the Stossel show, and so I don't know if you saw that, but I was on Stossel arguing for free immigration.
Yes.
You did see it.
And yay for Stossel being such a wonderful advocate for freedom as well. But yeah, Jeffrey, I'm so glad that you speak about free immigration.
Well, but you know, I've never been trolled so hard after that. And the thing that strikes me, I mean, yes, so, I mean, you know, half, 3/4 of the people who write me are just invidious trolls. But there are other people who are sincere about it. But what I find most often about people who want to speak about this issue is that actually they don't know anything about it.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
that's the thing. They don't know how few immigrants we allow, the conditions under which they're allowed to come, the number of years you have to wait. People always talk about the welfare state without any awareness that you can't get welfare in this country for 5 years, until 5 years.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I did a
I mean, so it's not, there's nobody comes to the US for welfare. It's ridiculous.
No. I did an episode for the Libertarian show a couple of years ago talking about immigration as well. And I just got so much hate mail from people. I mean, my entire episode was about debunking the myths. And I looked a lot to the Reason Foundation's research about it. Shika Dalmia does incredible writing about this. And, I put all these statistics out there, like, these are the actual facts. This is actually what's happening. This is the amount contributed by immigrants. And all these people were writing saying, like, they're stealing our jobs. And I'm just like, did you watch the episode? You just looked at the title, didn't you? You looked at the title and then you wrote me hate mail. I was like, all right, that's cool. But
yeah, I know. I get into these Twitter wars with people, and they write me, absurd things, about how, immigrants are sort of pillaging our country and stuff. And so initially I'll send links, here's the actual, here's the
facts.
actual reality stuff if you're interested, but they don't read them, or something.
Not at all.
Doesn't penetrate, their brain. So, but no, I think you make a good point. It's like one reason we need free market is precisely so that we don't live in a world in which you're sort of captive of whatever government you happen to be born into. I mean, that's like, so then every state becomes a kind of prison camp.
Yeah. I mean, if someone's born into North Korea, is that just their lot? And we just deal with that and say, oh, well, that's the country they're born into. They have to deal with their own things. They have to, sort that out. It's like, well, no one should ever have to deal with that. You're born into North Korea, you see that it's a really shitty place to live, and you move out of there as fast as you can. You have the ability to move. If America really cared about all of the poverty around the world, and everyone's talking about, like, oh gosh, we need to help people in third world countries and all these things, open the borders. These people would come in here and want to start businesses, and they would create jobs. And as you said, they don't have access to welfare when they come in. So just
my favorite thing that I hear from these people is, it's not inherently crazy, but I get frustrated with the arguments. But people say, no, we can't let these people from wacky nations, and to Americans, everywhere else is the third world. I don't know if you know this about America. Canada's the third world. Mexico's the third world. Yeah, Switzerland's the third world. I mean, everywhere.
Toronto? Oh, so the third world.
Anywhere outside of the U.S. borders is just lumped into one big category called the third world. Anyway, we can't let third world peoples come here because they bring their systems of government. As if everybody in the world who's living under some kind of despotism is personally responsible. And I said, give me an example of a place where you don't think we should accept immigrants from, because those immigrants will bring their rotten systems of government here. And the very first example he gave me was, get ready for this, Iraq. Now, Iraq has a terrible system of government, but I'm not so sure that I'm prepared to blame the Iraqis for that.
Yeah.
Given the 25-year war of the U.S. in the country, I'm not so sure that's the best example to give. So I gave up on engaging the person after that. But this is the level of
it's hard. Well, there is a small degree of hope. We have closed borders all over the world. You can't go anywhere. Every movement is tracked. You want to leave your country. It's not just a matter of leaving. You have to get a passport to leave. And it's basically not your right to have a passport. You have to, the permission of government has to be received first. And it's like it's a favor that the government's doing to you to grant you a passport and all of these things. So you can't leave at all without the permission of someone. You can't really do anything with your life without the permission of government. But there seems to be a lot of talk about different free areas around the world at the moment, whether they're just blossoming now or they've just been started, new technologies that are perhaps permitting new areas of living that we hadn't realized was possible before, or perhaps areas that have been in existence for a long time but only just gaining recognition or publicity. So did you want to like briefly talk about some of those places just to see what's going on around the world? And I also am fascinated, you wrote an article once about Australia, and about how that's a place where you would love to move because it seems like a very free place. And I would love to chat about that because I know that it's had a lot of traction on Liberty.me. A lot of people have commented, a lot of Australians have commented either in favor of the article. Some people have said, oh no, actually it's socialist and tyrannical. And it seems like it's a case of always greener.
I think you make a good point about that, and I've been intrigued by this because anytime I go anywhere, well, first of all, there's what we should probably call something like the traveler's bias. I mean, when you go to another country, you're not paying income taxes, you're not filling out, you're not dealing with business regulations, you're not dealing with any government officials whatsoever. I mean, once you're in a country as a traveler, for the most part, unless it's just completely totalitarian, you can develop a sense of freedom that the residents themselves don't have. I mean, I certainly felt that in Spain, I felt it in Austria, I felt it in Brazil. So there's a sense of like, oh my God, this is a free country. The cops are not following me around everywhere. Of course, in the U.S., we have a particular problem with the police. That actually most countries in the world simply do not have. So it's not only traveler's bias. I mean, it
was interesting. Just an anecdote about that. When I traveled home at Christmas time last year to Australia, and it was the weirdest thing because I'd had a few encounters of police in New York, and New York police are just renowned. They're notorious for being very aggressive. And I mean, New York's been through hell. It's just been, really dangerous place in the past. So there's precedent there and all of that. But I got back to Australia and I went out for burgers. It's, 2:00 in the morning or something. I'm at this place out in Guildford called Alfred's Kitchen. It's this grungy place by the side of a railway line up where I grew up. And all these policemen were there. They'd just come from the airport, and it was the feds, and they're all around, and there was just amazing music playing on the radio. So me and my sister and a friend, we're just like singing away to Madison Avenue and all of this. Then the police officers like singing along, and we're having a right old time. And it kind of dawned on me. I was like, oh my God, I feel so at ease with these people. I don't feel like one, wrong move and something will happen. And then I think someone drove their car and chucked a Yui, as we call it in Australia, which basically means do a U-turn, and it wasn't legal. And the police, I mean, they didn't care. They're there for getting the bad guys, right? Someone doing a U-turn, they're not really a bad guy. So they were, quite content to stay there at the burger place and continue singing with us. And it was breath of fresh air, because I've had lots of encounters in New York where I'll be at Union Square and sitting there, and there'll be some protesters I'm not involved with. I'm just there because I enjoy the outdoors or whatnot. And this one time the police arrived, it just started barricading off the area, and suddenly we're enclosed in this barricade. We're like, what's going on? And then we started getting harassed by the policeman, who's like, surely you noticed that this place is closed off. And it's like, is it? It's like, well, don't you see that? It's like, okay, yeah, just notice, like, we're going, don't want any hassle. And it's just sort of the difference between walking on eggshells and being at ease with people who are purportedly there to keep things more secure, So I think that you're right there. I mean, even in America, I'm sure that there are different areas, not like New York at all. That's just been my experience there, but you can tend to create biases depending on whether you're living in a place, whether you're traveling to a place, whether you have exposure to different, areas within that country, et cetera, et cetera.
But, the Australia case was interesting because this is a place that all the empirical data indicate is by large measures freer than the U.S., Yeah. I mean, I think I don't know. The indexes differ, but the last I checked, it was like Australia was something like maybe 6 or 7 on the world index of economic liberty.
We're number 3 at the moment, I think, on the heritage.
On the heritage, and I don't know what it is on the Fraser, but U.S. is now 16 or by some measures 20 or something like that. I mean, equal with the U.S. at this point is you just can't believe it. But I just wrote an article about this. What country is actually more or less identical to the U.S. on this index? Romania.
What?
Romania.
US, what are you doing? What are you doing?
This is the land of Ceausescu.
Oh.
I mean, this is a country that not too many years ago was one of the most totalitarian nations.
Yeah. So, I mean, would you still, after reading the rebuttal from people in your article, et cetera, after recognizing there may be a bias, would you still say that Australia is a good place for people to try to move to?
To say it ranks high in the economic freedom index, it's free relative to other countries, doesn't mean it's free, right? So there's a difference. And I do think that anytime you live under, any government, especially if you're a libertarian, you're just annoyed by the existing oppression that's there in the system. Somebody comes along and says, "Hey, you're living in a free country." They're like, "Look, we can't own guns." To hurt another person's feelings is illegal in our country. Which is true in Australia. Did you know that? Yeah, you're not allowed to hurt. You're not allowed to hurt other people's feelings in Australia. Which, it turns out, this is an ineffectual law.
Is this the same as the free zone, the safe zones in the US on campus? Is that the type of?
The whole country is like that. And
is it really?
Yeah. No, you're not allowed to hurt another person's feelings. But the thing is, in Australia, nobody ever gets. Every once in a while, a politician gets picked up but for the most part, there's an ineffectual law because it's just an inconceivable action in Australian culture.
But I mean, Australia is the land where you call your mates dickheads and you call people you don't like mate. That is like, is that true? I feel like we're an incredibly blunt group of people.
No, see, you've been away from Australian politics too long. I know more about it than you did. No, but I was.
No, I've been away from home too long. It's been 5 years. What could change in that time?
The new government was trying to get the law repealed, based on free speech grounds, and people were the average person I met was completely against repealing it because they figured because they figured that the politicians just wanted the license to insult people and hurt their feelings. That was.
What's wrong with insulting people? I mean. Really, are we going to go through life pretending that that some things that people say are valid and we're not allowed an opinion towards it? We're not allowed to offer a rebuttal?
I don't think the problem is that Australians suspected the motives of the politicians who were pushing for this because they figured they were probably up to no good, that they had a secret plan to hurt other people's feelings. So,
secret plan.
I kind of understand it a little bit, but anyway, it's not. But so there's plenty of unfree aspects of us, but relative to the U.S., it's far more free economically if you just look at the empirical data. So, but yeah, there was massive blowback, and I said something similar about Brazil. I mean, here you have a socialist country, and I was struck by the fact that I could just walk the streets and out without being. There was, no curfews, you weren't being harassed by the police. Actually, tremendously huge gray markets exist in the open air. They're an established part of national tradition, and huge private spaces, that are allowed to. They're like private communities within large cities and that sort of thing. So I'm talking about all the specifics, and boy, Brazilians got very upset with me about it. It's like, how dare you call our country? We're not free at all. How dare you call us free? But I feel the same way about people who talk about the U.S. as the land of free. I'm like, are you out of your mind?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, especially you living in New York and everything.
Oh gosh, yeah, and I ran my own business there for a little while, and it's just crazy, you never know if you're following all of the tax code correctly. If you want to have a real business there, you have to be willing to pay the compliance costs, which means, tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands if it's a larger business, to lawyers to actually just sift through all of the legal jargon to make sure that you're not committing some criminal offense by selling some product to someone. So it's very difficult to navigate.
I had the funniest experience when I was just in New York, and I'm driving. Of course, you've got these transportation wars going on in New York. It's like It's like Uber and Lyft.
Yeah. So I'll tell you about Canada in a second, but go on.
Oh yeah. So anyway, so I'm in with an Uber car, and he's like denouncing the yellow cab. Actually, he said Jello cab for a long time, and I found it forgetting that yellow. But Jello cab. But
Jello cab. I'm going to call them that. I need to go catch a Jello cab. Of course I don't. I only catch Uber.
So we were driving to an intersection. I go, see that construction? There's big barriers and trucks and asphalt. Piles of asphalt. Because I've lived here 20 years. That construction has looked exactly like that for 10 years. And, and he said every single morning, 100 guys show up, and they stand and they take selfies and they drink coffee and they talk on the phone. And 2 Mexicans shovel some asphalt around. They go home, and that goes on every day. And I said, well, that's a scandal. He goes, and see those cameras over there? Those are the traffic cameras that if I turn left on this light, if I run through this yellow light, if I, pull up over the line or whatever, then they will shoot a picture of my license plate, and I will get a bill in the mail for $200, $300, $600, whatever it's going to be. And if I don't pay it, then I go to jail. Because the money that I pay, that's what makes it possible for these guys to stand around every day. That's the way the system works. These cameras support these lazy guys over here, and that's the essence of the government in New York City.
Oh yeah, no, New York is a bit of a nightmare. I would move, but I know the most amazing people there. I have my entire libertarian network and all these amazing, inspirational people. I couldn't leave them. I couldn't leave the States for that reason. But yeah, Canada at the moment, Uber is facing issues, and apparently the government's declared that Uber's not allowed to ride because they don't know whether it's legal. They're still deciding. But then Uber's gone ahead and said, well, we're going to keep running in the meantime. And I've been using Uber in the meantime. But it's interesting talking to the Uber drivers and say that apparently they have to keep it quiet that they are Uber drivers because they get threatened. They get severely harassed by cab drivers. And it can be life-threatening. It could be dangerous. It's crazy.
Against the call. This goes on New York. I mean, you get eggs thrown at your car and that sort of thing.
Oh, it's disgusting. I mean, people are choosing to use Uber because it's the better option. Surely that should be a wake-up call to the cabs. And yeah, my heart goes out to the people who are the actual cab drivers. And I've also talked to cab drivers who are just severely exploited by the people who own the medallions and the companies who run this. And one female cabbie that I was chatting to in New York a little while ago was telling me that she broke her foot at some stage, and she couldn't drive, but apparently she would have her medallion revoked if she went for more than like 3 days or some ridiculous amount of time without driving her cab, and she couldn't get someone else to fill in for her. It had to be her driving, otherwise it was illegal. And it's just like, I mean, it's just barbaric. But I don't want to get too sidetracked, because I want to mention a few places around the world that have very interesting.
We need to talk about New Zealand, don't we? I mean, the interesting thing about New Zealand is that when I was there, I was struck by just the amazing number of people I met who had traveled from somewhere else, a lot from America, but Europe and Canada, and just really all over the world, who arrived in New Zealand and said, oh my God, this place is awesome. I'm going to stay.
You had a wonderful time there, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. But now I think New Zealand gives you something like 3 years, and then you have to like figure out what you're going to do next, right? I mean, so it's not a permanent solution, I'm afraid.
I don't know. It was actually my goal when I finished high school. My plan was always to take off a year and backpack around New Zealand playing guitar, and that didn't happen. I ended up going up to university to study economics and commerce, and I think that I would have had a much more fun and illuminating time in New Zealand, to be honest. I learned more about economics just from dealing with politics and meeting inspirational people in New York. But yeah, I mean, there's New York, I mean, there's New Zealand. There's also a place in Western Australia, the Hutt River province. Now, do you know much about that area?
Which province?
The Hutt River province.
I've never heard of it.
Principality of Hutt River. So I never heard of it either. And I I discovered it a few years ago, and now I'm actually the media liaison officer for this area. And I discovered it because one of my friends told me that there was this place, and it was near this place called Geraldton, and I was like, oh, my grandmother grew up in Geraldton. You know, I've never heard of this place. So I immediately, you know, got on the phone to my mum, and it was like midnight where I was, 12 o'clock where she was, and I was like, have you heard of this place? And she's like, yes, I've heard of this place. And she talked me through what this was. And then from there, I went on to do more research about it. And then the next time I went back to Australia, I went on a road trip out there, like about 6 hours out of Perth, I think. And what happened was, I think it was in 1970, Western Australia had all of these draconian wheat quotas, and they were putting all of the farms in the area out of business, making them go bankrupt, because they basically imposed these rations and said farms could, you know, only sell so much stuff, and it was based on however much they sold the last year or something like that. And apparently there was this area of land in the middle of nowhere in Western Australia. There's absolutely nothing around there. And for whatever reason, they'd only use a small percentage of their land that year. So they got these quotas given to them, which were just completely not right. We're going to send them bankrupt. And they wrote to the government. Apparently there was no legal recourse. These quotas couldn't be disputed. And they fought the government and said, listen, you're going to bankrupt us all. This is our livelihood. This is our life. We built these farms. And the government didn't want to hear it, said not negotiable. So then this guy, Leonard Casely, he decided to secede from Australia. And he warded off this area of farmland and declared it its own sovereign nation, the Principality of Hutt River. And basically, I mean, the way he actually managed this was through some really outdated loopholes in the Australian Constitution, really old ones. And actually it had more to do with the old Commonwealth laws from Britain. And apparently he had to declare himself a prince, because then the people who supported him on the land couldn't be held accountable, you know, couldn't be put on trial for treason. So then he became Prince Leonard Casely, and we met Sir Stephen and Prince Leonard when we went there, and there's Princess Shirley, who unfortunately passed away not too long ago. But the story of what happened now is the Australian government refuses to recognise that they're their own sovereign nation. But this principality has managed to outsmart Australia at every step of the way. And so now they don't pay income tax there. They're not on the electoral roll. Keep in mind, it's mandatory to vote in Australia, but they've been removed from the electoral roll. They no longer have access to government health care in this area, but they're still not recognised as their own country. So they're in this weird mid-zone where the government just kind of leaves them alone, and they don't pay, you know, income tax there. I don't have any of the benefits, but, you know, the Australian government says, oh, you're not your own country, but we're not going to fight you anymore. And it's fascinating, you know. It's remarkable what they've done there.
Wouldn't it be awesome if government actually allowed that option, you know, all over the world? It'd be something like, okay, you don't get any benefits whatsoever, and of course you don't have to pay any taxes either.
Yeah.
I mean, wouldn't that just like cause every single nation state to bust up, you know, like within about 2 days?
It would be amazing. It'd be like, yes, that is all I want from life. I don't want your benefits. Yeah. I mean, I do not want a Department of Agriculture. I do not want a Department of Education. I do not want these things. And in exchange, I won't pay income tax. It sounds very fair.
Totally, it's a great deal. No benefits, but no payments either.
Yeah.
I mean, probably like 91% of the world's population immediately take the deal. You know.
Yeah, totally. So, well, I mean, the smart ones would. Some of them would be like, oh, well, no, I kind of like all of these obsolete programs that don't affect me.
You know, that's fine. So then they get what they pay for, and so on. You know, but you know, that would be, and who would object, right?
Yeah.
Basically, I guess what that would mean would be like basically turning government into a voluntary association.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Oh, that sounds. You're teasing me, Jeffrey. That sounds too good. It's. I'm just reading through some of the thread of the people chatting here, and there's so much talk about Australian size thing. My water glass. People talking about how big my water glass is. It's like, well, it's Australia sized. I agree. And in response to people, yes, all Australians are convicts. I'm going to admit it.
That's lovely in a way. I mean, that's the best thing about Australia is a bunch of rebels who are once in jail. I mean, that sounds like
exactly
it's my kind of country. No, I love Australia, and I it's my second choice on the planet. I think New Zealand.
What is so New Zealand beat us?
Yeah,
you really know how to give the insults that cut deep, Jeffrey.
Unless it was Perth is out of the question, but
do you realise, I mean, Australians are meant to have a deep-seated rivalry with New Zealand, and you're really pushing me to stand up and defend that rivalry
like that, with that northern community on the river that I visited.
That northern community on the river?
On the northeastern side.
Did you go to Brisbane?
Yeah, Brisbane. That's my favorite.
Brisbane's pretty cool. But you didn't go to Perth?
I did not go to Perth.
Okay, so
most of my anti-Perth bigotry is just designed to drive you crazy. Because it makes you so upset.
Pushing my buttons. Actually, WA, Western Australia, moved to secede long ago from the rest of Australia because so many of the mining resources, etc., hold the rest of the country up, and then a lot of the East Coast actually get the benefits from taxes and all of that. So Western Australia did want to secede, and that's an interesting thing to explore. If an entire area doesn't want to be associated with the rest of that country,
the basics of freedom would say that it should. That's basically the core thing. In Perth, are you permitted to hold koalas in Perth?
Permitted to hold koalas? You know what? I brought a koala. This isn't my room. I'm staying in Canada at the moment, but it comes with koalas to make me feel at home. So I'm very grateful to the Canadians that I'm staying with. But this is the koala that I'm permitted to hold.
I like that koala. It's a little too big. Do you have anything smaller?
A little bit. Oh, you know what? Canada comes with an assortment of koalas. I've got this one here. Is this better for you?
That's a little more. Okay.
Yeah, perfect. I'm here to please, so I'm glad that I had something that I could offer you.
I was only concerned because I don't know. In Brisbane you can actually hold koalas. In Melbourne you can't.
In Melbourne you can't.
No, there's no place to hold koalas unless one of those bears falls from the tree. In which case.
Oh, the drop bears. Be careful of them. Drop bears are dangerous animals.
Yeah, but otherwise in Melbourne you're not permitted to hold koalas, but in Brisbane you can actually hold them. There's a famous picture of Taylor Swift holding one and the Pope and me. Those are the three most famous pictures from Brisbane.
I just needed to mention, sorry, now the digression had nothing to do with Liberty Spaces, but everything to do with awesome. So I went and saw Taylor Swift recently. Just putting it out there. It was pretty sensational. And I know you're probably a little bit jealous, Jeffrey.
Her newest tour from her newest album?
Yeah.
80, what's it called? 85 or something?
89. Jeffrey, I am so disappointed. You know far too much about Lady Gaga and not enough about Taylor Swift.
I'm working. Look, I mean, Taylor Swift is right up there. Taylor Swift to me is the Perth of female pop singers.
Well, I mean, from my point of view, that is a huge compliment because Perth is one of the greatest places in the world. So I'm just going to take that as a compliment, and we will leave it there and move on to the next topic. And I'm taking this koala off. I'm revoking your koala privileges. It's hanging back over here on the light. And let's keep going, shall we? And let's never mention this again. So next thing. All right, so we've talked about Principality of Hutt River. Seasteading. Doesn't that sound amazing? I mean, as soon as I get the technology to enable people to seastead, I am totally doing that. That just sounds amazing.
Well, and I'm not sure I entirely understand what the greatest promise of seasteading is, but if you could incorporate, a company in a sort of seasteading way, and then you could live somewhere else. I mean, couldn't you actually be relatively free of government regulations under those? It would be basically like a floating tax haven.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a great tax haven, but I mean, living by the ocean at all times sounds amazing in itself. And you also have to think about the type of people who would be attracted to a seasteading situation. People who really just want to live their life and be left alone and not have to deal with barriers to entry and government regulation and taxes as well, and all these awful things we have to deal with in everyday life. And being around those people all the time would be amazing, I think. And I envision this amazing community built up, filled with like-minded entrepreneurs who just want to take life and make the most of it.
Well,
You know,
I feel like all this stuff is, we libertarians sit around and talk about these things, but they're becoming ever more a reality. I look around the world today and I see a world governed by really anachronistic, very unstable regulatory states that are claiming the whole of people's lives, and I just don't see how that's a sustainable model in a future ruled by digital technology.
But it's the frog in the water situation, right? It's not sustainable for people who understand liberty and who understand what a society would be like without all of these strictures. But if you're someone who is just having their freedom very slowly, gradually, incrementally revoked, and they've never really looked into it and they don't know what other alternatives there are, they're not going to notice. And that's what I find is happening. I find that we are in an unsustainable situation and no one seems to notice. That's terrifying.
Yeah, I don't know if what you say is really true, because I think the reverse is also right. It's true that you lose your freedom a little bit at a time in ways you don't notice, but you can gain your freedom in the same sort of way.
Yeah. And you've written a lot about that. You talk about ways that you can, in everyday life, regain freedom, and I think that's amazing.
We're experiencing that all the time, and I do think the more people tangle with these government cartels and government monopolies, and it's like, here's freedom that's just like right here and I just want it, but then there's this intermediating institution denying it to you. It gets frustrating. And people have to have a good reason to suddenly come to believe in freedom, however narrowly you construe that. And when you're living such a state, when it's your profession, that can be a very sort of intense situation. It can cause people to actually embrace the ideas of liberty. There's otherwise they might not have thought about them at all. And this is going on all the time, especially with the app economy and peer-to-peer services. More and more people are experiencing these sorts of things. So I expect more. Look, 10 years ago, nobody in New York would have ever imagined that anybody could have ever challenged the yellow cab monopoly, and now the whole thing is just blown apart, and it's a complete mess. And we've got something approaching transportation freedom, not because any politician voted for it, but just because consumers and producers are talking for the first time and making deals.
That idea that technology is going to free us all. That's fascinating. I know we talk about Bitcoin a lot. That's just another tool that can just help give us back our freedom and makes life exciting.
And so transportation, it's in all over the place. But we're talking about physical spaces. This becomes a very important matter. I would love it if we could actually develop some real free zones in the world that have free migration. I'm intrigued by because many of the freest countries like Costa Rica, I think they have fairly severe immigration restrictions to other people in the region. I don't know about to Americans. I think you can go there and actually, for a few years ago, they were advertising for new residents. I don't know what the situation is now. But I was very impressed at the attitude of Liberland, which is this Croatian territory. I don't want to call it Croatian because it's actually just its own sovereign country. At least, that seems to be the way it's going. Welcoming Syrian refugees, so that which is an awesome thing.
I wanted to talk about Liberland as well. So that's something that's gotten onto my radar recently, and I think they've just recently celebrated their half year of being a country, which is very exciting. But looking into that about, how can an area of land go unclaimed? How you think about the earth and how every area has sort of been eaten up, claimed by someone, and yet there are these terra nullius areas around the place. So one in North Sudan as well. And it's fascinating. For those of you who don't know what Liberland is, It's an area between Croatia and Serbia, and basically the border used to follow the Danube River, and then there's the old Danube and there's the new Danube, right? And so now there is an area of land where the borders are shifting, and of course both parties want to claim the most land possible. So they're both claiming, one's claiming that it's still the old Danube, one's claiming that the border is marked by the new Danube, and of course the two areas both used to be part of was it Yugoslavia? Is that correct?
That would be correct. Yeah.
Yeah, and so when it was just different states in the same area, the disputes didn't matter as much. But now they're different nations, so it matters a lot. And so what happened was, if you're judging the border by the new Danube versus the old Danube, there's this one area of land that no one wants to claim. Because if one party claims it, then it means that they're recognizing that it's actually the old Danube border, or et cetera, et cetera. So there's this area that no one is claiming. And then this guy came in and said, great, let's create a sovereign country that promotes ideas of freedom and liberty, and let's get a whole bunch of awesome people to come live here. And that's what they're trying to do at the moment. I mean, if that succeeds, it just is really promising.
Really?
Because...
And 2 miles is actually 2 square miles is a gigantic plot of land. I'm slightly mortified. You talk about how all the places in the world are gobbled up. I mean, speaking as somebody who just got back from Wyoming on, a week-long trip to that. I mean, there's like nobody in this vast country. And I don't know how big Wyoming is, but it's like, I guess probably as big as like Germany and Spain combined or something. I mean, it's a vast, and nobody lives there. Mostly for the most part, Naomi, I'm sure, I don't know if you've ever taken a coast-to-coast flight, but this country is empty. I mean, there's like nobody here. It's ridiculous. And the federal government just claims to own all this land. Mm-hmm. And then you have to lease it, to like put a cow on it or something. I mean, it's just, the whole thing is preposterous. I mean, you can fit the whole world's population in Wyoming, and and you'd still be living, miles from the next person or something. I mean, it's just crazy. The vast country. The idea that America, of all places, is closing its borders to preserve the integrity of the racial stock or whatever the hell people are saying. It's just despicable. Really, it's just despicable. Whereas, anyway, back to Liberland, 2 square miles. That's a big, far bigger than Vatican City.
Yeah.
There's a 2 square mile area in Atlanta. It's a funny thing that happened. An old steel mill used to be there, and then of course that went out of business because I don't know, China or something. And then it just became like slums and like public housing, and it was just a disaster, and everybody hated its guts. And finally, the city was sort of out of money, out of ideas, and a private developer came along and said, "No problem, I'll buy it, but you have to let me own the complete place, and I'll put in private streets, and we'll have private. Everything will be completely private, non-gated, commercially accessible. But I want to hire my own police. So we're going to have our own. Everything's going to be a private community right in the heart of Atlanta." And so now it's this thriving area with private streets, private police, private everything, private stores, all of it, and huge apartment complexes. Everybody's clamoring to get in. Very expensive place to live, but anybody can go and shop if they want you to. And it's a lovely space. It's like a free space within one of the biggest cities in the United States.
I did not know about that. That sounds amazing. I'm going to have to go travel there and check it out. That sounds really exciting.
It's a place full of it's inclusionary. There's some rules, like no smoking and some other things like this, no gangware and like that, and they even banned profanity, which is funny, but nobody's monitoring. It's a wonderful free space, and every time I go, and I love to go there. I love to eat dinner there, go to the movies. It's just a diverse community of happiness and joy, and also the police they're actually nice to you. I mean, you can't even believe it. They're like, is there anything I can help you with tonight, sir? And we're like, oh, no, everything's fine. But you're welcome to go shopping. Macy's is down here. They're like trying to get you to, because the police have the incentive to like get you to shop and and make sure that you come back again, because that's what pays their salary. So,
yeah. Oh, that's amazing. I love your description. It's just a wonderful free place of joy and happiness. I guess that sounds that sounds ideal. Let's make the world like that.
Yeah, it is. And the thing that makes it that way is private ownership and the
Yeah.
absence of
Well, you know what? I've
state.
often thought about the idea of, public transport in New York City and how it's all, I mean, the MTA operates everything, all government run. And it hasn't always been that way. Private people came in and they built the tunnels and whatnot. But I've wondered, I mean, the tracks there are disgusting, the subways are grimy, filled with litter. They're just really unpleasant places to be. Now, if you had sponsorship of every station, I mean, if you said, oh, I'll meet you at West 4th, instead of saying that, you said, oh, I'll meet you at the Coca-Cola station. There is no way that Coca-Cola would want their name associated with grime and dinginess and graffiti and litter. They would make sure that those tracks were spotless. They would make sure that everything was wonderful and bright. And you know those Coca-Cola ads where there are all those flowers that fly out of the bottles and everything's wonderful and you're like, oh, I wish I lived in Coca-Cola land. I don't even drink Coca-Cola, but I still wish I lived in Coca-Cola land, right? Because everyone's happy there. Especially the 1960s Coca-Cola land where everyone has their cute glasses and their bathing suits and everything's just amazing. But I mean, it just seems that I am one of those. I am. I'm a 1950s, 60s Coca-Cola commercial. But it seems that private sponsorship would just solve all of these problems. We don't need to live in a dirty New York. Just let people come in and want to make a profit from these things.
The thing that I learned from Atlantic City. It's not enough just to privatize everything but the police. I mean, actually, maybe the most important thing that you have private police. They're responsible for security and enforcing the rules. And if you get that wrong, you get everything wrong. So the private police is what makes Atlantic Station beautiful.
Yeah.
And here's another thing I learned from the Atlantic Station. People tend to think of, and this is I think it tends to be a libertarian error. Okay. Era. Okay. Era. But it's that they think if it's private, then you have to wear you have to have special fees to admissions tickets and bracelets and big iron gates that let you in and exclude other people. But what you learn from a place like Atlantic Station, which is, I say, is 100% private, they're desperate to have you there. It's not. I mean, the idea that they would keep keeping anybody out is crazy. They want you there. They're inclusionary, and in fact, they're recruiting you to come. The same way that in the early period of the American colonial, it was not even American colonial, in the early 19th century. It was very common for states to be recruiting residents. They want you to move there. Like, come to Texas. We're awesome. We're amazing. You can be free. You can earn a lot of money. You can experience great frontier life. We're the coolest place in the world. So if we actually had competition between states with free migration and
oh yeah,
and where private enterprise is basically in charge of setting up the communities, we wouldn't have people trapped with nowhere to go. It would be your mailbox would be stuffed full of flyers begging you to move to whatever the coolest.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be that's the kind of world I want to be? I mean, maybe you need money to move somewhere. Maybe they have these huge incentive programs to get residents there.
Yeah, for sure.
It would work. I mean, it would be a beautiful place. Instead of border controls, you'd have everywhere you travel to that have parties welcoming you with champagne and hula dances.
Definitely. I mean, everything would be like a wonderful, bright department store where everything's on display and they're trying to entice you, to feel warm and fuzzy about this place you're in because they want you to participate in the commerce there. And countries are not like that. They're like, get back, show us your documents. And there's, oh, it's so nasty. I always get like an almost panic attack re-entering
Isn't
the
it
States.
interesting? The more you put the state in charge of anything, the less people themselves are regarded as assets.
Yeah.
And private enterprise is in charge, the more people are regarded as the most valuable resource.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't remember where I read it, but apparently someone remarked that these days people are no longer referred to as citizens, they're referred to as taxpayers. And that's fascinating. That's an interesting shift in terminology there. There's one more place I just want to mention before we head off, because it's almost time to wrap up. But Honduras, now that's been a fascinating place to watch and to see the progress there. But I'm still hopeful that, you know, something great is going to come out of Honduras. I think at the moment, like the High Court ruled that, you know, they couldn't have a free zone there, and then they overturned the new High Court, and then they ruled that they could, and now they're sort of waiting for different agencies to talk to each other.
I hadn't heard about that, but I know that there are free, what do you call them, free space, free cities and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And Nicaragua and Argentina, and those are the two I'm thinking of. I thought maybe it was Honduras, but I know Nicaragua and Argentina, maybe Guatemala. But these are all very encouraging. Unfortunately, right now, they tend to be luxury places for the rich.
Yeah.
And what we really need are places that, like I said, that, you know, all people consider to be assets. So,
well, I mean, do you think that somewhere like Honduras would just be a place for the rich? Because if you're setting up a free zone, obviously that's to encourage people to go in and invest and start up companies and all of that. But a natural byproduct of all of that happening, of course, it would be wealthy business owners going in. But those people, if they're going to be based there, they need services. They need, you know, it would naturally create a diverse atmosphere.
Look, all great new trends in the world, technological or otherwise, you know, begin with the wealthy, and then gradually extend out to the rest of the population. So, you know, when I said that it's the only way, I didn't mean to put that down or disparage it, because that's always a good first stage. But I'm looking forward to a time when yeah, people are treated as the assets they are, and included. And we live in a world of free migration. I feel like it's coming. I just, you know, it's important to remember that the age of passports and border controls and all the experience now is really recent in human history, you know, and that that's not where we want to be and not what we want to do. So if we make progress towards freedom, we'll make progress towards free migration too. Those have to go together.
100%, and I'm super hopeful that not only are these free areas going to prevail, but also technology is going to allow us more options. Perhaps we'll become a multi-planetary species. Perhaps we will enable seasteading. Perhaps we'll learn how to have floating cities. And if you don't like a place, it's not a matter of picking up and leaving your home and all of this. Just unanchor your home and move it to the next place. You know, that just sounds like a wonderful way to live. So
a man today who is actually, you know, highly educated American, moved to Puerto Rico, and San Juan, and fell in love, and he opened a restaurant. They opened up a thing, and he's doing very well, and loves his life there very much. And now he's starting a think tank. So, you know, there are places to go and things to do. It's a matter of being a little bit adventurous, like you are, Naomi. You're an adventurer. You went all the way from Perth to the Big Apple.
Big Apple.
And you're coming back again. You're in Canada and you're moving back to the US if immigration cooperates within the next.
If immigration, yes, I am going to a new job there, which is very exciting. And hopefully we'll be back soon. But you never really know with US immigration.
Like that, so, you're just a little cautious too.
Yeah, I never like to count my chickens before they hatch, you know. So so there are options for people. You know, there are options around the world. There are people who are liberty loving, who are trying to make a real effort in this space to try and carve out areas where people can just live their lives. And I applaud those people and I thank them for dedicating their lives to that. A lot of us have different paths and we didn't choose that life, and we just want to go and do the thing that's calling us. And these people are carving out their lives and molding it around creating free spaces for everyone. And I think that that is really wonderful. And I wish them all the best and hope that they get a lot of support.
Well, Naomi, it's been lovely visiting with you, and I'm glad to see it's been too long. I feel like
Too long.
I feel like you've, well, you found sanctuary in Canada temporarily, but you're coming back to your true home. So,
that's true. Well, next time I meet you, Jeffrey, we'll have to do another From the Peanut Gallery episode. So, so let's talk about that and see some films and talk about how they invariably relate to capitalism as a commentary on free market economics, as they always tend to lead that way.
Too long. It's been too long. I totally agree.
All right. Lovely speaking with you. Thank you so much, everyone who's been chatting with us. We'll talk to you soon.